Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to one of the, well, first and foremost, it's an absolutely miserable day outside today. You couldn't do anything outside anyway, so you might as well come in and find another way to be productive. So thank you for joining us today. And it's obviously a very serious matter, but it's great to see us come together as a community to discuss something that really, if it doesn't touch any of us directly, we know somebody who is touching. And it's great that you guys are here. And hopefully today we can all learn something and maybe all play a role in saving someone's life. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan West. I'm the president of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who don't know, the Chamber of Commerce in Livonia has been here since 1950. Actually, the Chamber formed before the city was incorporated, later in 1950. We are 1,000 members, non-partisan, non-profit business organization that supports the business community in Livonia and around Western Wayne County. So, and part of our work with the Chamber, as we look at drug addiction, opioids, mental health issues, many of our employers are dealing with these issues. And our chambers try to do more in that area about helping our employers better manage their workforce and deal with the issues that come with this. So I'm very grateful to Kate and the Livonia Democratic Club for inviting me to be a part of this event. I thank all our panelists who we'll hear from shortly for their expertise. And I really hope these next 2 hours together will be enlightening, probably a little emotional, but hopefully make us all better and more helpful to those who need it. So again, thank you for joining us. Just a couple opening statistics about the reach of opioid and drug addiction from the American Physical Therapy Association and National Institute of Drug Abuse. 214 million prescriptions for opioids were issued in 2016. 11 million people abused opioids in some fashion in 2016. At least 1,000 people in the United States are treated in an emergency room each day for misuse of prescription opioids alone. This does not include issues from heroin or other street drugs. In 1999, there were less than 17,000 people who died in the United States from drug overdoses. In 2017, that number skyrocketed to more than 70,200 deaths from drug overdoses. Again, 17,000 in 1999, 70,200 in 2017. This number has more than tripled in less than 20 years. This epidemic does not discriminate. It impacts people of all ages, ethnicities, races, and income brackets. And the reach of this epidemic is far greater than any of us, I think, realize. So just kind of the foundation of what we're going to start today. And we're going to open with a quick update from our 2 lawmakers in Lansing. State Representative Lori Pohutsky and State Senator Dana Polhanke are going to come up and talk about the latest from Lansing on this issue.
Short, so I had to make an adjustment. Sorry, guys. Thank you guys for being here. As you know, this is an issue that's prevalent across the state, but certainly in our community. In Lansing, some of the things that we've been working on in the House, Senator Polhanke can give us an update on the Senate in a second, but has mostly been around defining who can carry Narcan. So there has been previous legislation. Narcan is the opioid antagonist that is used to stop an overdose. There's a nasal spray, so it's fairly easy to use. Previously, peace officers, so police officers, things like that, have been able to carry it. Recently, we have been trying to also expand that to corrections officers, because unfortunately, just because you are in a corrections facility does not mean that you do not have access to drugs and that people are not experiencing overdoses. It has also been expanded to be available in libraries, unfortunately. But because libraries are a area where people can come and go as they please, they aren't asked to leave, they don't have to buy anything, a lot of libraries have been finding people are overdosing and they wanted Narcan available on premises. So we did expand Narcan to be available there. The tricky part about that is that's more of a reactionary law. That's not actually stopping the problem. So one thing that we are also working on, we are looking at this in the Health Policy Committee, which is a committee that I sit on, is making it easier, or not easier, basically removing the prohibition from state workers who have retired. They've been retired since September of, I believe, 2015, from the mental health profession. they can now go back and do work again for the state without losing out on their pension, because we are facing such a shortage of mental health workers. There has been a 4-year sunset put in that, so this law will be revisited again in 4 years, because the hope is by that time we will actually have made some changes to the way that these people are being compensated, so we can actually attract more people coming in rather than asking people who have already retired from the profession to come back and continue working. And it basically, you know, Narcan and expanding where that's available is great because it's cutting down on the deaths that we're seeing, but we have to actually work on the problem. So I'm really glad that we're here with everyone and we can address some actual solutions rather than just being reactionary. So I'm going to turn it over to the Senator who can give you an update on the Senate side. Thanks.
I'm not sure, sorry. Thanks, Rep. Pawlowski. My name is Dana Polinke, Senator Polinke. I'm proud to be the senator in Livonia, and I also represent the communities of Northville, Plymouth, Canton, and Wayne. Some of the bills that have been introduced, there have been 2 so far this session. Senate Bill 199 and 200 would, like Rep. Pawlowski talked about, expand prescribers and pharmacists' ability to dispense Narcan to public libraries, and limits the liability of library employees for possession and distribution of this opioid antagonist. Senate Bill 254 looks to create stricter standards on opioid prescriptions by having prescriptions transferred from prescribers to pharmacists electronically. So this would prevent fraudulent hard copy prescriptions. And the GrowthWorks treatment partnership with St. Mary's Hospital has a state appropriation. Appropriation means money. And keeping that appropriation continuing and continuing the program is one of my top budget requests. Knowing we have a representative from GrowthWorks here today, I'm really excited to learn more about that program. Also, I want to give you my phone number. If you have any bill ideas or anything else you would need from your state senator, it's 517-373-7350. That's 517-373-7350. Thank you.
Thank you, State Representative. Thank you, State Senator. Just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, there were 3x5 cards distributed when you came in. Any volunteer from the club that's here today, if you want to ask a question of our panelists as we go on, please look, write down a question, submit them to a volunteer, and we'll get those to you. We'll work those into the program as we can. Also, please, would everyone please silence their phones throughout it so we don't interrupt the conversation going forward. Let me open with an event we did about 6-7 weeks ago at the Livonia Chamber of Commerce. We had Ken Daniels, who was the TV voice for the Detroit Red Wings for 22 years. Many of you may have heard he lost his son, Jamie, at age 23 to an opioid overdose while in treatment program in Florida in December of 2016. And as you can imagine, Ken went through a whole world of emotions. And over the past year, he's decided to try to keep his son's legacy by speaking about his own personal loss and while sharing what he's learned about this epidemic and try to help others save lives. We are very honored to have Ken speak at an event for high school students and business people back in February. And I want to show a quick video clip of what he had to say, because he had a very powerful message.
Didn't believe he was as smart as he was, because he was. He wound up graduating from Michigan State with a 3.5. Although when he was in grade 12, he thought, or even before that, when he was 14, that he needed Adderall to get a little longer studying time for exams. So he went to see a psychologist and psychiatrist, and yeah, they prescribed Adderall, that he had ADHD. Was insistent he didn't have. I didn't think he did either. But he was on Adderall, did okay in school, and then when he got to college, his freshman year at Michigan State, In the dorm, one of the first few months, he was introduced to opioids. And I know this because after Jamie passed, the individual who started Jamie on opioids called me about a month later asking for forgiveness. He'd been suicidal, dealing with his own mental health issues. So I told him to get help, make something of his life, do something in Jamie's honor, do something for himself, and don't put your parents in the position that Jamie put us in. So we knew Jamie had been introduced to opioids early on. We didn't know, though. He hid it very well. As Patrick, you would know, and the old story will go, how can you tell when an addict is lying? His lips are moving. They can turn it on a dime, just like that. It's that simple. I can't tell you the number of times when Jamie would come home and I'd see him sort of struggling, but yet laughing, and then he'd go to the refrigerator and he'd get something to eat, and then the remnants of the cheese and everything else was back in the cupboard and not the fridge. And I said, how high are you? He said, I'm not high, Dad. And then would carry on a conversation for the next 20 minutes. Then he'd disappear. But our contention is that it all started with Adderall and then the opioids in his freshman year at Michigan State. You can become addicted to opioids within 5 days. Jamie did. A lot of it can start as easy as in the medicine cabinet in your family home. The story was out there originally that when Jamie was in grade 12, he got Vicodin after his wisdom teeth were extracted. He did from a friend, he got a couple, but we don't believe that was it. We actually got rid of the Vicodin that the doctor has prescribed. Thankfully, physicians now, hopefully more and more, and it's going to take a lot of time, are ending the abuse of what they prescribe and overprescribe medication. That you have your wisdom teeth out. As an oral surgeon friend of mine, I said to him, how many Vicodin do you prescribe for a regular wisdom tooth extraction? He said, 20, 30. I go, what the hell for? How many are they using? Have you ever checked? Have you followed up with your patients over the last year to see how they did? That maybe you can prescribe 4. Maybe you can prescribe 6, maybe 10. Maybe just ibuprofen and Tylenol will do. And the Prescribing Engagement Network, Open, which has done such a wonderful job, the University of Michigan, is finding just that now. If you go to a doctor and a doctor says you need this, get a second opinion. You probably don't. It's nature versus nurture. You don't know how you're going to react. My daughter did take 2 Vicodin after she had her wisdom teeth extracted, and that was it, and we made sure she had no more than the 1 day. But you can have 2 kids in the same family. One could have a mental illness, one may not. You just don't know. Abstinence is probably the best policy. But when Jamie had started on Adderall and then was introduced to opioids, which again can change the chemical receptors in your brain within 5 days, the glutamate receptors change, your ability for cognitive reasoning has changed. You want to say no, you can't say no. Addicts don't want to be addicts. The perception, why can we talk about any disease we have? You can have Crohn's disease, you can have coronary disease, you can have erectile disease, you can have anything, diabetes. We'll talk about anything below the shoulders. If it's above the shoulders and it's mental illness, heaven forbid we talk about it. And I'm standing up here before you saying, we were one of those. We were a family of those because we thought Jamie was going to be that success story. Because after Jamie was addicted and out of Michigan State, and after he crashed his car 3 times denying he took nothing, the best words we ever heard was when Jamie called me from summer camp when he injured his arm and knew he couldn't rehab himself any longer, and called me that day in tears and said, Dad, I need to go to rehab. Thank the Lord. I'd never been so happy in my life. And I told him at that moment, I've never been more proud of you than I am at this moment. We had to wait a couple of days until the bed opened in Brighton. He got into Brighton 11 days and then left because he's over the age of 18. You can't make him stay. That can be a problem with our system, but it is what it is. So Jamie came home. And in that clarity of what I hadn't seen before, where he's no longer falling asleep in his soup, when you call upstairs and you say, let's go, I'm tired, Dad, I can't, because he probably popped a pill. From the days where we had drug tested him in the house and we said, if you use again, you're gone. And the day that he was so desperate because he was addicted, and again, addicts can't say no. he taped pee to his leg and gave me that urine sample. And I said, geez, this isn't warm. What do you do if you're a parent at that stage? Do you kick him out? Does he go downtown Detroit? Does he go get drugs or anywhere? They all have their ways to go. So when parents say to me, what do? I don't have that answer, except we need to talk about it, and we need to get into therapy and have the family be a part of it and not be ashamed of it, because if it's not happening in your house, and I hope to God it isn't, it's probably happening 2 or 3 doors down.
If anybody gets a chance to hear Ken Daniels do this presentation, I strongly encourage you to do that. It's a very powerful, compelling story. Obviously, you can sense his heartbreak. He's done it over 100 times, and what he told me about when you get, it's been 2.5 years, the further you get away from it, the only thing that changes is you cry less. So this is something he's going to forever live with, but he's going to make sure that nobody else goes through it. So if anyone gets a chance to hear Ken speak, please do so. The most important thing you can do with people who are struggling in these areas is to give them a space where there isn't judgment. Many people dealing with these issues feel guilt and shame for their situation. As Ken said, nobody wants to be an addict, but they don't know how to get out of it. I applaud every one of you for being here today. This crowd is pretty impressive for a Sunday afternoon in April to gather and have such a heavy conversation. This isn't easy, but you have the courage to be here today to learn what you can do to help friends, family members, co-workers, and neighbors. This effort today by each of you could help save someone's life. So let's begin with the audience, actually. Anyone here touched by an opioid death or a drug overdose death? Does anybody want to share their story? Kate?
Hi, everybody. I'm president of the Livonia Democratic Club. I was inspired to pull this Opioid Forum together because 2 years ago, my nephew died of heroin and fentanyl overdose in Troy. He was 34 years old. He had a good job. He had a good income. His parents were absolutely devastated by this. It's such a tragic thing for families that are going through this, and such a tragic thing for families that have these issues in their families. But Dan is right. Ken Daniels is right. We have to talk about them. It's the only way that we can start getting better on this.
Anybody else want to share their story?
My name is Gerald Perez, and I'm a Livonia Police Reserve Officer. I'm also running for councilperson for City of Livonia. My son, Max, was affected by this. He OD'd. He passed away in 2006. And it was very, very hard to take this, just like Ken Daniels was talking about. He went to college. He was a U of M, and it was 1998, and for 1 year, we kind of lost touch with him. Then I went up there to see him one day, and as I watched him and talked to him, he just was a different person. We finally reconnected again later on, about 5 or 6 years after that. But his mother had passed away in the year 2000, so he inherited $100,000. Where do you think that went to? And we had no control because he was over 18. So it was very hard to take. But to watch where he was going to, where he came from, it's very hard. He was going to a PhD program over at Wayne State. So he was downtown all the time after he had left U of M. And so he had access to all the drugs, wherever. He knew exactly where it was at. And they ended up finding him in the bathroom at Wayne State. And I found out later on that he had been married, and I couldn't even go down to identify the body. So I found out he was married at that time. I'm like, What else, what other secrets don't I know? But I just want to give you an idea though, is like the stigma that's associated with the drug addict. It's not always the child or the adult or whatever that's, wearing rags and, is going to steal from you all the time. They come from everywhere and anywhere. And, how can we get to the origin of their dismay, their mental illness? That's the key, I think, is that we need to get to that point. Understand that sometimes you're an addict, you don't even know it. It's something just brings it out, and there it is. Thank you.
Okay, time for one more. Time for one more. Anybody else want to share their story? Gentleman in the middle.
Kate mentioned her nephew. Can you guys hear me? Well, her nephew was my son, and I wish I could tell you that my son's substance abuse problems started 6 months to a year before he passed, but they started in the 90s when he was still in high school, and he got heavily into marijuana at the time. And I know a lot of people, especially with the legislation today, think that marijuana is a harmless little drug. But in the way that my son started it, it became a compulsion almost immediately. And I tried to enlist the parents in Clarkston of the friends that he was hanging around with to see if we could do something together to try to stem some of this drug abuse. But I found out years later from my son one day when he was laughing at me that most of his friends' parents were buying drugs from him at the time, so they had no real interest in helping to stop the problem. In the early 2000s, the drug abuse continued. He started drinking, and then about 10 years later, he developed pancreatitis. He got it 3 times in 2-3 years, so he could no longer drink. And then from the drinking, he went into the opioids. He found a doctor out in Troy that gave him opioids for no reason, mountains of pills. And finally, when the doctor finally cut him off because Blue Cross insisted they do it, my son found somebody else to provide him heroin with a fentanyl kicker, and he was doing that for probably the last 6 to 12 months of his life. Christmas time, my son and I would play a game. I call it Cops and Robbers. And any of you who have addicted family members, you know this game. He's going to sit there and he's going to go through his way, figure out how he can con dad, con mom all the time. Barb told me the other day about something in 1999 that she wrote in her diary where Matt told me he needed $35 or some kid in high school was going to beat him up. Well, $35 at that time was the price of some amount of marijuana. So when I heard this, I said, yeah, that sounds like Matt. And we went, before Christmas, he came and he told me he owed $5,000 to a bookie. And if he didn't pay the bookie, that he was going to be killed. So I knew right away, I said, well, this story sounds familiar. So Daddy loaned him the $5,000 under the condition that he come out of his house and move into our house, because I wanted to see who the people were that were supposedly going to kill him. So he stayed there 5 weeks, and on the first night that he went back to his house, he got $400 or $500 of this stuff, and he killed himself. So, as a parent, this is how you feel. And for you, those of you who are parents or have addicts, this is how you feel. You feel like you did the lousiest job in the world raising your kid, even though for 20 years it was a battle between he and I every day. I go through on a daily basis, what didn't I do right? We took him to psychiatrists, we took him to counselors, we took him to rehab, we took him everywhere. Nothing worked. But when people hear, well, your son died of a drug overdose, I always feel there's a sense of shame over that. But I do know that as his father, I did everything I could do to try and save this child. In 2016, he got in trouble. I said, okay, Matt, you want to get out of trouble? You can go to the 40 days in jail that the court wants you to have, or you can go to rehab. He said, I take jail, Dad. You're not putting me in any more rehabs. So you get to a certain point, there's not a lot you can do. So part of the reason I come today is we need to come up with better ways to try and diagnose and solve these problems. Because I did everything in my power, his mother did everything in her power, and we can talk to him still, but we go to the cemetery to do it. So that's my point.
All three stories are very compelling, and you deserve all our sympathies, and by an applause, we want to thank you for that.
No, thank you for sharing that, and I think it's important for people in this gentleman's situation is to make sure these people are not alone. Listen to them. This is a burden they're going to have to experience for a long time, the rest of their lives. And it's important to realize that, just be there and listen. And that's really why I think it's great that everyone's here to realize that. Let's get into our panel right now. Another gentleman who actually, the Patrick that was mentioned in the Ken Daniels clip is Patrick Strokes. He's got his own personal story with addiction, and he was able to emerge from it, and not only emerge from it, share his stories with others, and now his life's mission is to get other people into recovery. He works with GrowthWorks, and he's an amazing story, and we welcome Patrick Strokes.
I was told I have to hold this close to my mouth. So, the first thing I want to start out with is to the family members who have lost loved ones, the parents, the brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, as well as to the same folks who may have someone in their family that's suffering from an addiction. It isn't your fault. When I was born, my aspirations were not to become an addict and an alcoholic. I like to refer to that now as this: someone with a substance use disorder. I have a disease. When we refer to addicts and alcoholics, it fuels the stigma. So that's why I like to try to refer to it as someone with a disease. I have a substance use disorder. So I'll start a little bit about who I am, and then what I became, and then what I'm doing now. So I am a certified peer recovery mentor through the Michigan Association, certified MCBAP, Michigan Association of Certified Addiction Professionals. And I'm also a certified peer recovery coach, and I'm certified by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the CCAR. So to be able to do this, I have to be in recovery from a substance use disorder for at least 2 years. Today, I have 1,912 days clean and sober. Now I'm that because, in part, people did not give up on me. I have 2 DUIs that I blew in the high 2s. And my personal best rock bottom was when I assaulted a female police officer in a 15-hour blackout from Adderall, opiates, and alcohol. I still to this day remember none of it. I became an animal. I didn't care about my children. I didn't care about my family. I cared about no one but my drugs and my alcohol. That's it. Nothing. I would protect that with my life over my children and my family. So, through 30 years of active addiction to one degree or another, because addiction is a progressive disease, I did not start out drinking a half gallon of vodka a day and popping pills. I just started out drinking beer in high school. And then it just got worse. because I was burying things that I did not deal with within my life. I just didn't do it at the end because it was fun. Quite frankly, it was a job. Everything that I did revolved around those substances, and I protected it with my life. Again, I cared about no one. So after 4 separate rehabs at a very high-end rehab, which was $1,000 a day, I ended up in a closed-down convent, a closed-down Catholic church complex in Royal Oak at 12 and Stevenson, which is now a Kroger. And I lived in a convent for 17 months, homeless. When my wife dropped me off there, the person that I ended up working for, volunteering there, Mark, said, does he have a place to go when he leaves here? This is important that you remember this. She said, you people do with him whatever you people do with you people when you people are done doing with whatever you people do with you people. And she started leaving. And then she stopped and said, and do not contact your sons because they are no longer your sons. I have to protect them. Thank God she did that. That is when I was able, I was no longer enabled, and I was able to then step back and look at my life. This particular place was $105 a day, and it was paid for by the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. They, in part, helped to save my life. When I go back to the people that didn't give up on me, and it's important to mention, I was an absolute mess. I created nothing but chaos for the 35th District Court and the Canton Police Department. Nothing but that. Chief, I didn't get to Livonia, and I didn't get to many others. But I'll tell you, they never gave up on me. I went through a 2-year treatment court program in the 35th District Court, it's called Sobriety Court, where they help an addict and alcoholic, someone with a substance use disorder, to manage their life through the consequence. And I completed that. And I was connected with GrowthWorks. 2 months before, actually it was 2 weeks before I started with GrowthWorks, I was allowed to come home. And then I started with GrowthWorks as a peer recovery coach. Now that's taken me, it'll be 4 years on May 4th, to a whole nother level in my life. My life has been repurposed. And that is to dedicate it to helping other people suffering with a substance use disorder get into treatment. We have partnered with St. Mary Mercy Livonia, with the Canton Police Department, the Livonia Police Department, the Northfield Township Police Department, and the Westland Police Department, Wayne County Healthy Communities, and the Detroit Mental Health Authority to help those that are suffering from opioid addiction and other addictions. Our program employs 14 coaches, female and male, with all separate backgrounds in addiction. It's funny because what we have in our background is kind of like our resume, where most people wouldn't hire us. Because the majority of us have legal issues, and we also have, obviously, addiction issues. But that's our credibility. We walk in the shoes of the people that we are serving, and I say serving because we serve them. We work off a moment of clarity. And what that moment of clarity is, when someone gets brought back, let's say this particular example I'll give. Someone is brought back by Narcan, and they have a stranger over them. A lot of things come into play. Typically, they're very upset because their high is gone, their money is gone, their dope is gone, and they have a stranger over them. Then the guilt and shame sets in. Guilt and shame is deadly. But we work off that moment of clarity where they look and they say, I need help. And then our coaches strike. We respond to St. Mary's Hospital and also the police departments that I've listed 24/7, 365. Doesn't matter what day. It can be Christmas. Doesn't matter. We go in there and we meet that individual in the emergency department, the chemical dependency unit, the behavioral health unit, the CDU, the ICU, and the medical. We have access because St. Mary Mercy Livonia understands how important it is to have peer recovery coaches helping their patients. To date, St. Mary Mercy Livonia has asked since April of last year 790 people if they want to see a peer recovery coach. That's powerful because last year, before April, that wasn't being done because we didn't have the program. and because, as our senator mentioned, we're getting funding from the government. Thank you. I get emotional like that. Because we are making a difference. So we get people connected to inpatient treatment and or peer recovery services. And to date, out of all of the patients that we have seen since last April in St. Mary Mercy Livonia's emergency department, we have an 83% success rate getting them into treatment and or peer recovery services. We can't do that without our partnership with St. Mary's and without the public safety departments. It's unique. It's a unique program. When we were talking about Narcan real quick, and I'm not going to get into that because some other panelists are going to do that. The Narcan gives an individual another chance. It's not a cure-all, it's not. But it's an opportunity for us, the me's of the world in recovery, as coaches, to strike again on a moment of clarity. And as many, I did not get it. I didn't get it the first time or the 12th. Over and over and over again, I was that son. I need $35. Are you using now? We don't want to be a person with a substance use disorder. We want to be the healthy husbands and the fathers and the sons and everything else. But it gets such a hold of us that we can't let it go, and we need help. And there is help out there. I'm going to give you just one example, and then I'll wind up. We saw in the early stages an individual at St. Mary Mercy Livonia that was 21 years old. He was shooting straight fentanyl. We followed that individual through inpatient treatment and along with the peer recovery coaching. That individual, as the program that I work, we don't like to talk about tomorrow, we live within the day. But that individual is coming up on 1 year clean and sober. He has a job, he has his family again, and he is working a strong recovery program that includes a peer recovery coach. That's a powerful statement, because shooting straight fentanyl is different than shooting heroin or taking pills. It is one of the stronger pieces of the drug that goes into you and just will not let go. So I thank you. If you have questions, at the point of questions, please ask. It becomes very emotional. Because you're all here because you care. They're all here because they care. And they aren't giving up on people. Is there a solution? We're working on it, and we're becoming part of that solution. But we need support. All of us need support. I do say that there's a friend of mine in the audience from Families Against Narcotics. They are a huge support for the families, and I wanted to recognize her, Lauren. They are a great resource for the families to help them deal with these issues as we are dealing with the actual, the patients, our clients. So I will say thank you so much for being here and caring, and at the point where questions come, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. A quick side note, the Livonia Save Our Youth Coalition, one of the valued resources in here, actually started by Diane Montez, who lost a son to an opioid overdose several years ago. They are now providing Narcan training, and actually are providing it to some of our business leaders in the Livonia Chamber later this month. So Sherry Davidek back there is with the Livonia Save Our Youth Coalition, and if you have any questions about that program, please seek her out. Growth Works is involved with the Livonia Police Department, who's on the front line in responding to those in crisis moments with addiction. And to say the least, our first responders with the Livonia Police and Fire Department are very busy these days. And we're glad that Livonia Police Chief Curtis Cade is here to share a little bit about what the men and women in his department department are dealing with addiction. Chief?
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here with the other panelists and all of you. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so if my voice comes and goes a little bit. And I promised my seat partners here that I'd keep my distance as well, so we'll get through it. First off, I'm going to build off of Patrick's presentation. The Western Wayne Rescue Recovery Program, we've been meeting and planning on this for about a year and a half before it was rolled out. And I see Mr. Spivey here, and I need to give him, Dave Spivey is the president and CEO of St. Mary Mercy Hospital, and we would not be where we're at today with this Western Wayne Rescue Recovery without his commitment from day one. David, thank you very much. So, from the law enforcement perspective, I mean, we see this is a scourge. And the effect that addiction has in a general sense on families and productivity is really countless. But what I want to really spend a little bit more time on is the fentanyl and carfentanil, which is the mix that's being used, and which is, quite frankly, more times killing our people rather than the actual substance themselves. Fentanyl and carfentanil are extraordinarily strong, and we respond to overdoses probably on an average one every other day. Some of those are, quite frankly, most of those are revived through Narcan, and the big numbers that we're hearing as far as deaths as related to overdoses, if it wasn't for that miracle drug, Narcan, they would be, I mean, not that they're not huge now, but could you imagine what that number would be and the outcry that our society would be putting forward if the numbers were 200,000 a year, which they easily would be. It is huge. The effect, or from the law enforcement officers, the guys and gals that are on the street. And, well, this isn't my call. But can you all hear me? Okay. All right. So the fentanyl and carfentanil, the impact that it's had on my officers, the men and women on the street, is very significant as well. It's not just the response to the scenes and the recovery and the administration. We've had 3 Narcan saves in about 6 weeks, our officers alone. The fire department, they administer Narcan more times than we do upon arrival at a scene. But when it comes to the law enforcement officer making a traffic stop and investigating, as we had in Livonia about 6 weeks ago, officer makes a routine traffic stop. The vehicle is occupied by 2 subjects, and one of them is being arrested for outstanding warrants. And as the officer is searching the car prior to the impound, there's some plastic baggies in the car, and he didn't really pay much attention to it, and one of the baggies, or more than one, had fentanyl or carfentanil on it. And the officer, whether he inhaled some of the particles or somehow got absorbed, began to become overcome by the fentanyl or carfentanil. Self-administered Narcan, immediate results. We have seen this, whether it was Michigan State Police had an incident similar to this not too long ago. There was an officer, actually I showed at the State of the City, or spoke of briefly, where an officer in Ohio, he had made an arrest and had some white powder on his uniform, didn't really think anything of it, brushed it off as he was going into the police building, and immediately became overcome by an overdose. So the fentanyl, carfentanil, those issues on top of the mental health and the addiction that our society is experiencing, families are experiencing, really complicate overall the application and dealing with the crisis that we find ourselves in today. But I am extraordinarily proud to be partnering with GrowthWorks and the great people there, the great folks at St. Mary Mercy Hospital, my colleagues that surround us, Northville Township, Westland, Canton Township. and the success that we're seeing. The numbers, when you think about 790 people, 790 people, I mean, that now have an opportunity that is not present everywhere else, as far as having the medical component, the counseling component, all of these resources available to them that wouldn't have that otherwise. Those are huge numbers, and we're just closing in on year one. So, and also to mention, funding is very important, and we've had great support from Lansing up to this point. And actually, we had the assistant director of Health and Human Services from Washington, D.C. visit us at St. Mary's about 3 months ago. And from the Washington, D.C. level, they're watching this region of the state of Michigan and our success with this program on the national level. So there's a lot of good things that a lot of people are doing to help address this and give families the peace that they need for recovery, and certainly for the individuals that have the addiction issue, which is a disease. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Police agencies work with the court system to get those dealing with addiction, and Judge Mark Summers from the 19th Circuit Court in Dearborn is here to...
I'm just district.
Or district? District Court Judge. Oh, circle. See, I was trying to promote you. You won't take it.
No, I work for a living.
19th Circuit District Court Judge in Dearborn, who will talk about his experiences with those struggling with addiction in his courtroom and how he is trying to get people out of jail and into recovery. Please welcome Judge Mark Summers.
I have often tried to imagine what that person walking through that door first perceives when they enter a courthouse and a courtroom. First thing we do is we put them through security. We have armed guards. Send them into a room where there's somebody comes out, they say, all rise, although I don't do that part. My officer says, please be seated, because we have too much work to do and we don't go through the standing and sitting part of that. The next thing they see is somebody wearing a robe of authority at the front of the room, reading off not first of all their name, but a number. It is case number 19C-1745, Lori Smith. So we've made them a number. We've put them through a security system that tells them that they are a suspect. If we give the full case citation, we say the state of Michigan versus Lori Smith. And yes, we are an adversarial system that, when used correctly, the adversary approach works well when you combine defense and prosecutor. But you imagine the view from below. I got a great catbird seat. It's kind of like this. We are not welcoming in that sense, generally speaking, in our judicial system. The next thing I do is I read them their charge so that they understand their charge. I had a young lady not so very long ago, as I'm saying, you're charged with XYZ, and the maximum penalty is 93 days in jail, and as I'm saying jail, I hear the fudge, only she didn't say fudge. She heard that she was going to jail, even though I'm just giving her her rights. We can do things to change that perspective. We can do things to change how we treat people in the system so that they understand that when used appropriately, our resources can be healing rather than simply punishing. Yeah, there's the punishment part. That's the stick that I get to carry. And it's an important tool to have. But the reality is, at my level, most offenses are punishable by not more than 93 days in jail, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year. You got to get up to the felony level before they can threaten you with serious prison time. So I have to use my quiver of arrows judiciously, pun intended. I have to have that threat, but more importantly are the carrots that I might be able to offer to somebody. The other person I see might not be coming through the front door. They have just spent the night in the lovely local jail, looking and feeling their best. like they've been left out all night in the rain and put away wet. And if they are going through withdrawal, it is visibly noticeable that they are going through withdrawal. You don't have to spend very much time in my business, either as an attorney or a judge, to recognize when somebody's going through withdrawal. And sometimes they start a little bit of a pace in the prisoner box, and all they want to do is get out of there. They just want to go. They'll say whatever they think you want to hear. It's kind of like asking for the $35. They'll say what they think you want to hear to get them out of there as fast as they humanly can get out of there. They will tell you that I have a job interview tomorrow, even though they don't. They will tell you they have a place to go, even though they probably don't. And I do keep a phone on my bench where I call relatives. I say, if I let you go today, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to go to my mom's house. Well, what's your mom's name? Does she have a phone number? I literally will call them and say, Lori's here, and she was just arrested. She says if I let her go, she can come home. No. More often than not, it's the no. When's the last time you saw her? 3 weeks ago, could be 6 months ago, might be a few days ago. We know the problem. From where I literally sit, there are no good answers. Very often, candidly, what I do is, if I have someone in crisis, clearly going through withdrawal, and I drug test. Probably more than any other judge I know. We keep this little dip test right there. Court officers go through bags full of those medical gloves. They do drug testing every day, all day in my courtroom. And oftentimes I'll have somebody else say, are you going to pass? Well, there might be some marijuana. Uh-oh, opiates, cocaine, amphetamines, sometimes the whole cocktail. That gives me a clue as to what I can do and should be doing in terms of setting a bond, because I'm trying to describe the process. They're going to have another court date. Sometimes they plead guilty, although if I think they're going through withdrawal, I'm not going to take a plea from anybody under those conditions, because they're not in their right mind at that moment anyway. And frankly, I think it's constitutionally infirm, but anyway, they need to talk to a lawyer. So we'll set a next court date. It's either a pretrial or in some instances a sentencing. Maybe they have absconded earlier and I just got them back. I have some very rough, rugged, and unfined tools. I can set a high cash bond. What I will do often is intentionally detox them in jail, because I don't have anywhere else I can send them that I know they're actually going to go there and stay there. And the Wayne County Jail is, frankly, they do a fabulous job. It's crude, but it's the tool I have. So I'll set a high cash bond with a GPS tether, but I ordinarily will add a caveat to that for the Sheriff's Department, and that is I will say you may release them without them putting up a single dime if it's straight into a residential treatment center. Now I know the center's not going to take them until they're detoxed, so I know they're going to spend at least a few days at the county. And then if the teller's available, and they're pretty good about that, and they're willing, they can go into the residential treatment center. Ordinarily, with my calendar, last year I had 2,390 new misdemeanor defendants as new cases, new defendants assigned, with 3,441 cases amongst them. I had 194 felony cases representing 189 defendants. We don't have a lot of extra time during the day. And the majority of those people, somewhere in their background, have some form of substance use disorder and or a co-occurring mental health issue on top of that that complicates things, and I think somebody else will probably address that. Normally I'm setting the next court date at least 6 to 8 weeks down the road, not with this group of people. I set it 10 to 14 days ahead. I just squeeze them in, shoehorn them in wherever I can, because I want to see them as soon after they've detoxed as possible so that I can actually have, hopefully, a rational conversation with them. The transformation in 10 to 14 days, as many of you know who've had family members or friends who go through this and they come out of it, the transformation is remarkable. I make a point the first time I see them when they brought out into the prisoner box. I call them by name, not by number, I say good morning or good afternoon to them, and the next thing they're gonna hear from me is, you look fabulous. I can't believe how much better you look from the last time I saw you. I believe, someone else can speak to this, but I believe that that makes a difference. Any positive reinforcement we can give, then I feel like I can have a real conversation about contacting a treatment center. There are some that will come and pick defendants up right from the jail or right from our probation department for the transportation. The Salvation Army does that. Detroit Rescue Mission will come and pick people up. What I want to know is, where are you going to be tonight if I let you go today? I keep a couple of things on the bench. You've already heard about the Narcan kit. I literally keep this on the bench and use it as a display to family members and defendants alike, and tell them, wherever you are with this, if it's opioids, if it's heroin, if it's fentanyl, this has to be in your house somewhere, and somebody needs to get trained. Thank you for what you do in that regard up there. The other thing I keep on the bench for those suffering with opioid issues is an information sheet on the medication Vivitrol. I talked to them about that. I asked them if they know anything about it, if they would consider getting on some kind of medication to assist in their treatment. And again, your treatment people will get into that much better than I ever could. But frankly, I've started using the word miracle drug. Now, the downside that I see too often along with this, however, is that people are addicted to more than one thing. Surprise, they get on the Vivitrol shot, and the next thing I get is a positive test for cocaine. And I don't see any magic bullet for that. I don't see a magic bullet for any of this. But what I want to stress more than anything is that our court system needs to be dedicated to the problem-solving model. And we actually have a large network in this state. I'm very proud of it. I've been a member of the Michigan Association of Treatment Court Professionals for, I think I've been a member for 15 years. I've been on the bench either 15 or 16 years. I've been a member of that. You don't see a lot of publicity, but we just had 900 people at a conference in Lansing last month. It's growing exponentially. I can talk about that for hours, I won't. But we have great teams of people out here, and you've heard about your local team already. Great teams of people working towards better resolutions, better outcomes for people. And at the end of the day, from the criminal justice standpoint, if you're not outcome oriented, then you might as well just stay home. Because if you're not interested in actual rehabilitation, in recovery, then that person's just going to be back, and maybe it's going to be your town, maybe it's going to be the town down the street. Frankly, from a financial standpoint, whether you are conservative, progressive, liberal, whoever you are, whatever political part of the aisles you come from, if you don't spend the money to do it now, you're going to spend more money later if you don't solve the issue, if you don't attempt to solve the problem. I'd give a shout out to FAN. I know what great work you do, and for anybody interested in that, they have a website that lists the meeting times and locations. There are a whole bunch of them in April. I was just looking it up. I'm going to try to make one, I think, on the 16th downriver. It's in Lincoln Park. I think it's the 16th, but you can check the website. Help is available to families and those suffering with the substance use disorder alike. And I view my job, if I'm worth anything at all, is to try to move people into that treatment setting. So that's where I am. And I better stop or I'll get into high gear and keep going for the rest of your hour.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate that. Nationally, the opioid epidemic gets bipartisan attention as leaders from both parties in Washington continue to discuss how to address this issue. We are joined today by our city's representative in Congress, U.S. Representative Haley Stevens, who will discuss the latest in the federal response and funding effort to help those with addiction. Congresswoman?
I'd like to start by saying that this problem, this crisis that we are living through as a nation, as a state, as a community is not going to be solved by some big policy from Washington. We have a funding problem, absolutely. The White House has issued statements and calls for a national reckoning on the opioid epidemic. Congress has, previous to my arrival, has passed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. That was in the 114th Congress. We're now in the 116th Congress, and that was a $180 million of legislative package to address the shortfalls of funding. But we recognize that there's still a $220 billion projected 10-year shortfall in funding that is costing us, the opioid epidemic, upwards of $500 billion a year. And Michigan, what this means for us here in Michigan is that it's it's $1.7 billion that we are missing in terms of funding. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank my friend Kate Tchaikovsky for pulling this together and for taking your story, your story, and bringing our community together. The numbers are overwhelming. I was talking about the dollar figures, but we're 47,600 deaths a year as a nation. We are in the third year of life expectancy decline as a nation because of this opioid epidemic. I did not know what my friend Dan West shared about 11 million people abusing opioids a year. The 11,000 that are going into the hospitals nearly every single day. And if we take a look at what we are doing here today as a community, it is incredibly important and is incredibly inspiring. We have a Chamber of Commerce, we have a State House Rep. Lori Pahutsky, we have our State Senator Dana Polhanke, we have our police chief, we have our city attorney, we have our district judge sitting here, we have what we need a lot more of in Jennifer, from Livonia Public Schools, and I know you're going to jump in. And I would say one of the most important people on this panel is Patrick. Because we are a community together, focusing on the resources. Many of you know that a priority of mine as your member of Congress is an all-hands-on-deck approach, that we can't pass the football around as part of the solution making. We need to come together as Lansing officials, as city officials, as members of Congress, as a community. We need to be creating spaces for recovery and to listen to people like Patrick who are in recovery so that the next family, the next person can find that on-ramp. We need to rewrite the story. We need to do better, by the way. And so a big reason why when Kate approached me about this, I said, I'm here to listen, and I'm here to report back to my colleagues. We have caucuses dedicated to the opioid epidemic. We've got legislation that we are looking at. We are obviously eager to support our state rep officials who are putting together pieces of legislation. But we need to be continuing to create communities and spaces for recovery. Because what is happening in this country and in Michigan is overwhelming. And it's real easy to just kind of keep going by, or it's that story or this story. But when I look at the problems that I want to solve as your member of Congress, this is absolutely one of them. And so that's why when we're in district and when we're in Washington, D.C., we are on the phone, we are deliberative, and we are continuing to identify ways in which we can come together to solve this problem. So we've got questions coming, which I think are important. For those of you who want to continue to tell your story, I want you to do that. I want you to find also safe spaces in my district office. I'm joined here today by Colleen Hobart, who's my district director here for the U.S. Congress, Michigan's 11th district. Our office is in Livonia, all right? We're on 6th and Newburgh on Pembroke Avenue. We've got a nice space for constituent outreach services. We're helping people break down the channels of frustration within the federal government. We've got questions with your IRS or your Social Security or your health care. We want to help you. And so I'm sharing that because we need more of those safe spaces in our community. We need more places that we can come together. And it begins in classrooms, it begins in auditoriums like this. And so for everyone here today, share the stories that you are hearing today. Share the dialogue. Make sure you're reaching out because we never know who is facing a hardship or feeling like they don't have anywhere to go before it's hitting rock bottom. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Stevens. Across the country, there have been several class action lawsuits against the manufacturers of these drugs being blamed for fueling the opioid crisis. The city of Livonia is involved in one of these lawsuits and is here to talk about the status of this litigation is Eric Goldstein, one of the city attorneys for the city of Livonia. Eric.
Hi. You've heard a lot of discussion about programs, response. All of these things cost money, and the money for the programs and the response tend to come from counties, state governments, local municipalities like the city of Livonia and townships. And that money is coming from their pockets. And where does that money come from? Taxes. And no one's happy to pay taxes. At least nobody I know. And the need to generate revenue to provide services was pretty heavy before the opioid crisis hit. And as you can hear from the various narratives, the opioid crisis and the various different ways it manifests both on the street and in the courts and in the various sessions, the sobriety courts that have been developed. That takes money that had been used for other things or calls for more money. It's impacted state and local government in a very, very big way. The thought is that the taxpayers who have fronted this should still get the basic services that they bargained for.
Why does the city kill the microphones? Jeez.
This isn't the city. This is okay. So in multi-district litigation from across the country, there are, I guess, in general terms, a class action where counties, cities, and townships are suing those who have profited from flooding the market with opioid pills, from persuading good and decent doctors that there's no risk of addiction, from confusing patients about the risks. Yes, more lights are turned on, more light bulbs over people's heads are on, and there's greater awareness of the risks now, but that doesn't help those who have come before. And you've heard tales today of those who have continued to profit by releasing pills to those who, rather than facing a medical need or a chronic pain management problem, are suffering from an addiction, which makes things worse. This multi-district litigation is very complicated, and I certainly am not going to pretend to be an expert in it. The city of Livonia is participating in it. and I am the primary legal liaison with the attorneys advancing the multi-district litigation. So I am perfectly able to share with you what I've been able to learn about the process from that experience. We have been called upon to identify as best as we can data and numbers about how the opioid crisis has impacted operations, from increases in crime, retail fraud, as well as emergency responses to those suffering an overdose, continued or increases in people having a spiraling away from normal civilized life into, fighting just for their own experience, for their own drug addictions, and it just turns into a whole slew of problems from crime, vagrancy, prostitution, and it just spills out, creating an extra burden on the social safety net, the judicial system, and the first responders. So we've been asked to try to quantify that as best we can. I know some municipalities are even looking into their own self-insured programs to see if they can demonstrate that their own employees are suffering from the chronic problems of opioid addiction, which increases the cost of self-insured programs. All of this is designed to try to impact those who profit from release of the opioid drugs. This doesn't just mean the pharmaceutical manufacturers and their marketers, but also, here's an example. Through the course of the litigation, I have come to understand that the plaintiffs, the municipalities, through their attorneys, have demanded hard data tracking numbers of pills into the community, step by step. So it's pills that leave the source of manufacture, pills that go into distribution, pills that land in pharmacies. So we can track the numbers. And what you can infer from the numbers are pretty simple. If the number of customers a local pharmacy has is X, but the number of pills a local pharmacy is distributing is X times 100, well, that's an eye raiser. And so the litigation is including those pharmacies, but it's on a data-driven basis. In recent action, the city of Livonia has added 3 local pharmacies to the list of defendants based upon this data. So our hope is to try. Government is going to do the best it can within its means to provide all of these services. It's not easy, but we're going to do the best we can. And my experience with Livonia is that Livonia is never going to stop doing what it thinks is the right thing merely because of the cost. But we still have to pay for these things. But Livonia is on the forefront of trying to recoup these costs so that the full array of services can continue to be provided. But not just that. The hope is that this litigation will be a part of a larger solution, part of a larger response. We don't want to interfere with folks who have a true need for proper medication of both short-term and chronic symptomatology. But the science and general knowledge shows that what was represented when the opioids first hit the market, that these are safe and they're not addictive and don't worry about it, they can't be abused, use and use them, use and use them. Well, we know that's not the case. And I don't think there's any sense of injustice in trying to get those who have profited from that misrepresentation to help pay the bill and perhaps slow the manufacture and slow the release without impeding the flow to those who can truly benefit and only benefit from these medications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Addiction and drug use among students have long kept educators up at night for many hours. But this issue has intensified in recent years in our community schools. It is important to keep in mind that all communities are dealing with students and families impacted by addiction. We're here to share some observations and responses from Livonia Public Schools. Is a school psychologist by trade, but she currently serves as the Director of Student Services. Please welcome Dr. Jennifer Terrio.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and a privilege to work for K-12 public education. Our ultimate goal is to educate our youth, to have them be college and career ready, but ultimately we want to do that in a safe environment. So when Representative Stevens talks about a safe place, we hope that school is a safe place for our students. So when we think about drug use for our students and our families, some of the impact that we see, nationally, 2.8 million school-aged children are living with non-biological parents. So we have a large component of our student population that live with grandparents now due to drug addiction that are in foster care at this point in time. We see students with poor attendance. They come to school late, so there's a lot of tardiness. They're missing part of their education. We see poor grades because they lack engagement in our school system. At times we see truancy, where our students are absent for multiple weeks and the school system trying to re-engage those students as well as their families. With drug use for some of our students, we're thinking about suspension, again, where students may miss opportunities to receive their quality education, and then unfortunately drop out as well. Some of our students are so disengaged from the public education system that they drop out. Some of our students also experience mental health issues. Sometimes the reason why they are engaging in drug use, anxiety, depression are two of our major mental health issues that we see in some of our students today. So what are we doing about this in our schools today? We are lucky enough that we have an honor board. I see 3 of our members. If I'm missing some here, I apologize, but 3 of our board members that support Andre Oquist, our superintendent, in providing services for all of our students here in Livonia Public Schools. We have mental health providers that provide support for every student in our school. We have school psychologists, we have school social workers, counselors, elementary support teachers, and student assistant providers at the high school and middle school. So for our mental health providers in our school district, so for those that support our middle school and high school, our staff has received Narcan training. We do have Livonia Police resource officers in our high schools to support our staff and our students. Our students also raise awareness by providing assemblies at our schools as well as posters. We have resource centers for our counseling department where students can come and gather information on any type of issue that may arise. We partner with GrowthWorks, which is a huge, wonderful partnership that Livonia Public Schools have. We provide educational support groups for students in small group or individual groups, looking at helpful versus harmful coping and talking about the distinctions between those two. Our health curriculum provides information for students on the opioid crisis so that all of our students are educated on the impact of drug use. And then what some of you may know is that last week we just had our PSAT and our SAT statewide testing, and our seniors do not come to school for part of one of those days. And our Director of Secondary, Dan Willenborg, has created an online learning opportunity for all of our seniors to take on the opioid crisis. There are articles that our students are required to read. There are videos that the students are required to watch, and then they take a small quiz at the end as part of their daily curriculum. So again, that we are increasing that awareness for all of our students out there on the negative impact of drug use. So again, I just want to say it is an honor to work for K-12 public education, our board, Ms. Andre Oquist, our superintendent, and the support that our state and our federal government gives us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Terrio. hear from our final panelist. There's two issues. We bring in Jessica Hillen here, who is a behavioral health specialist from St. Mary Mercy, Livonia. On the treatment side, Jessica talked to us about the importance of rebuilding lives in the treatment process, but additionally, how to appropriately scrutinize prescriptions you are issued. We talked earlier about Ken's presentation about being offered too many of a prescription, what's an appropriate amount, but also to realize there is appropriate times to have these pain-killing meds, that pain management is a process. So to talk on the treatment side of the process and hope for people like Patrick who rebuilt his life, and also talk about the pain management process, we welcome Jessica Hillen.
Thank you everybody for coming. So I'm a behavioral health specialist over at St. Mary Mercy Hospital. I have been a social worker there for the last 5 years, running the intensive outpatient program. Just a little bit about the programs that we have at St. Mary's. First is we have an emergency room, a behavioral emergency room that supports substance use disorders as well as mental illness. So anyone can come, whether they're an adolescent or an adult, into our emergency room and be immediately screened in terms of crisis intervention and be placed accordingly, whether that is given referrals to treatment providers that are in the community or placed within our own facilities within the hospital. We have those opportunities, and I think one of the biggest frustrations that I get as a clinician is when I am getting phone calls and say, I didn't know that this was out there. A lot of people don't believe that there's resources out there, but we do have some wonderful resources over at St. Mary's for both the mental health and the substance use disorder side. We also have a chemical dependency unit that's an inpatient treatment program for people with diagnosed substance use disorders, alcohol as well as opioids, sedatives, crack cocaine, heroin, marijuana as well. Can come in. It's a subacute detox, so it's a 5 to 7 day stay where we're really focusing on getting people stabilized medically and introducing the rehabilitation process. From there, a lot of the times we are either referring again out to the community or the program that I run. That program is an outpatient program, so our patients go home every day. They meet with us 3 times a week for 3 hours a day, and they're usually with us for 4 to 5 weeks. It takes 12 sessions to complete that program. And during that time, we are really focused on helping support that first crucial 30 days of sobriety. And it's been such a blessing. I just want to give Patrick another high five. To work with him and his team, they have been absolutely wonderful to work with. Our patients linking them once they leave our services back out into the community. So coming to the chronic pain issue, so pain is real. So we just want to put that on the table. Pain is real. We can't dictate whether or not somebody feels pain or they don't. It's a relative thing, so everybody experiences it at different stages, right? The thing about pain management is we are a chemical culture, and what I mean by that is we have been programmed to, when we have an ouchie, is to take a pill. And pain management, the talk about pain management, the conversation around that has to change because pain management has to be treating the person as a whole, right? And so what that means is incorporating other pain management techniques like exercise. Exercise is great for pain management. Psychotherapy, it's an important tool when we're talking about managing chronic pain. Cognitive behavioral therapy is an evidence-based practice that really focuses on helping somebody manage their chronic pain issues. There is acupuncture and physical therapy. The bottom line with that is there are other alternatives to help people manage chronic pain. But we do have, so I think my view gets skewed a little bit sometimes because I work specifically with the 10% of the population that has a substance use disorder, but then we have 90% of the population that doesn't, right? And we have to, again, change the conversation about what pain management is going to look like, because there are people that have chronic, lifelong pain problems that have to be managed. And one of the biggest opportunities is, again, is opening the conversation about what that needs to look like at an individual person, an individual level that's going to treat all aspects of the person, not just saying, okay, you have chronic pain in your hip, let's treat that pain and then not treat anything else. Let's not treat the depression and the anxiety that goes along with it. We have to treat people as a whole. We also, there's our physicians that we work with use other alternatives for pain management. I believe that working with a great medical team that is vetted in not only the addiction side, but medication safety. A lot of doctors that I specifically have experience with, they just don't know a lot of the times in terms of what the potentials are, because anybody can become addicted to painkillers. If you're exposed to them over a long period of time, there are those chances. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or you're 85. If you have exposure over a long period of time, there are those possibilities, but recognizing other problematic behaviors within treating a single individual, meeting them where they're at is important as well. So the other side to this is really looking at how the mental health and the co-occurring disorders are playing a role into all of this as well. So we have, I call it the chicken or the egg scenario. So we have a lot of people that come into our program that have a long substance use disorder history, but also come with a co-occurring disorder, which means that they are diagnosed, they carry an anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, anorexia, bulimia, any other depression, another co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And sometimes we don't know if they were depressed and anxious, and then they started self-medicating and using substances because of that, or because of their substance use, developed a mental illness after. So we kind of scratch our heads in terms of, well, how do we treat this? And the best thing is to really look at the treatment team and as a whole what we can offer. So from our perspective, we're treating again the person as a whole. We believe in an interdisciplinary approach, so we're really working with the addictionology and the specialists in addiction medicine, as well as their therapists in the community, as well as their family members, as well as their primary care doctors, and making sure that everybody is on the same page so we can really help this person develop a healthy life. And I think from a clinical perspective and our goal within the program that we run, our biggest goal in this whole thing is really helping people understand that there is life in sobriety. Anybody can get sober, right? So we have a detox program. It's not pleasant. Nobody likes to go there. But if you can get through that initial process, that's essentially the easy part, which sounds kind of backwards, right? It's figuring out that there is a healthy, happy life to be lived within recovery, I think, is the biggest struggle. And I think my colleagues and I know we really strive to help offer encouragement and help open that conversation and say, hey, there is life after substances, and it might be a little rocky, right? I think a lot of times, especially family members, don't have any idea what recovery looks like, because nobody knows what recovery looks like. It's going to be different for everybody, what that path and that process is. But I really offer encouragement to don't give up hope on people, because that's what I think, myself as a clinician really want to help people understand, is that there is hope and there are people that care about you. And there are also lots of resources for family members. I know we have a lot of family members and people that have been affected in the audience, and the biggest thing I can tell you is please take care of yourself. There are a lot of resources within the community that can help people really, put the effort into making sure that they're healthy. Because I think, like Patrick said, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you're not going to cure it. But we can do our best to help support those that are suffering. The last person, to know that their brain is broken is the person with the broken brain. So they need our support and help as a community, as with all of these people on this board really are putting effort. And I think that it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. And I really feel blessed, to work at St. Mary's and to be able to spread that and utilize the team that we have along with the Growth Work Partnership to really help within this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We have about 15 minutes or so for questions, so I'll get into this as quickly as we can. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're trying to put, not individual, but I'll try to gear the questions towards the panelists. So the first question, geared on the adult side for Jessica and Patrick, on the student side for Jen. What is the best first step to getting someone help? How can you deal with someone who might not want help?
So I love what Patrick talks about, this idea of moment of clarity, and I have a lot of patients that I work with, and I feel like I have to manage my own expectations about what recovery looks like, and I talk with a lot of people, and I'm like, yes, okay, this is what we're going to do, and in this moment, they really believed whatever, that path, they were going to go to this many meetings, or they were going to go to this therapist, or they're, going to apply for this job, and in that moment, that's really what they believed. But then that moment may pass at any given time, and I think it's really grabbing onto that moment of clarity and really running with it, but also understanding that, again, it's managing your own expectations as to what that has to look like. Maybe it's making a phone call. Maybe it's saying, hey, like I looked up all of these resources on the internet. Do you want to try one of these? We can't force people from our, legal side, but we can't force people into treatment, but we can do our best to support and say, hey, right now, I'm here for you. If you want it, it's here. And really just meet people where they're at. When they're ready is when it's going to work. And it might be kicking and screaming, and it might be not. But for me, I think it's really just meeting people where they're at and just being ready to be by their side whenever they're ready to accept that help.
That's exactly right. So meeting them where they're at, working off of that moment of clarity. What the coach's responsibility is to navigate with that individual the recovery process. So whether it be a 12-step recovery program or multiple pathways of recovery, what works for that individual in getting them connected to a healthy, safe atmosphere and lifestyle. And that means sometimes changing their friends and staying away from family members. But we're there continuously to help them navigate that system, and we stay close.
In the school system, we have the unique role that we work with your students for about 6 to 7 hours Monday through Friday, so we really get to know your students extremely well. So having our staff know what the signs are, what are we looking for in terms of a student that may be having a substance abuse problem. Building relationships with students is crucial, not only for this school, but for all schools. So making sure that that student has one safe person at least that they can go to. Working with the families and community outreach, ensuring that we have resources available for the individual student as well as their families. And then going back repeatedly to that student to make sure that they know that we care and we're never going to give up on them.
All right, our next question I think will be geared towards Representative Stevens and then to Eric as well. How is funding for the opioid problem distributed to each community? While every community is affected, some are more affected than others. I guess, is there a formula or a strategy of how that be distributed?
Well, I'm not a representative of our finance department, but what I am aware of is this. Some of the materials that we use come from county programs. For example, the Narcan kits. Fortunately, Livonia doesn't have to pay for the Narcan kits that we arm our police and fire responders with. They come from the county. But in terms of specialized funding to get more responders on the job, there's no funding for that. To get more funding to help support the various programs that we're doing locally, we're on our own for that. And we're doing the best that we can, and we'll continue to. The notion of a large pot of opioid funding coming to the rescue is a great idea. I'd love to see it happen. I think people are working on that, but I mean, no offense to any elected official, but there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of interest in making the walk, but they all have to vote and get a majority and get an executive to sign it and find funding and find sources for it, and it's very complicated and difficult. So I'm not holding my breath waiting for that wave of help, but I know that people are doing the best that they can.
That hits it spot on. The 115th Congress passed the Support Parents and Communities Act for opioid addiction, and it was $3.3 billion for the country, yet way short of where we need to be. Where does that funding go, and how does it get access? Well, it starts with federal funding to our Health and Human Services Agency department, and then goes to the Michigan Department of Health. That is one agency. What we need to look for are grants and resources for our police department, for our schools, for more social workers, for support for growth works. I'd love to sit down with you, Patrick, and your co-workers in terms of taking a look at your budget and your resources. This shouldn't be totally volunteer driven. It can't be. And we all know, and I work with the social worker organizations, how difficult it is to recruit people to be social workers. And so we run a social worker shortage, and yet this needs to continue to be all hands on deck. So you're absolutely right, Eric, that oftentimes passing large pieces of federal legislation that have big price tags become cumbersome, particularly when we have exploding deficits. But we know the cost of inaction. I want to talk about something that was raised during the family stories. Our state recently legalized the use of marijuana for recreational and medicinal purposes. And your congresswoman said, if we're going to do that, we need to also include in that proposal or through state legislation or through federal legislation support for our schools, support for education. I love your approach, Jennifer. I love what you're doing in Livonia Public Schools, and I know you need more support. You need more resources. You need additional professionals who are joining you. All throughout Michigan's 11th district, where we have the best schools in the state, some of the best schools in the state, but yet we don't have enough guidance counselors. Nationally, we're running a nursing shortage right now. How do we imagine doing this as a community when yet we don't even have the basics? And so that's why, I'm not completely cynical about what we can get done in Washington, but I also know where it begins, and it begins with communities. It begins with the all hands on deck and identifying grants or foundational resources. We've got a luxury dreaming about, the future, and you all know your congresswoman loves to talk about high-skilled technology jobs and innovation, but yet we can't embrace those opportunities until we reconcile our present-day frustrations and challenges, and this is one of them. It's the funding is a major, major challenge, and so I'm going to pose this to those of you in the audience, and some of you, I know you, and you're really great activists, you're really great volunteers. Make this a part of your activism, make this a part of your Washington outreach. This shouldn't be a debate. This should be something, and it absolutely, by the way, is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue. During freshman orientation, this was one of our sessions that I went to. And I had colleagues there from Minnesota and New Hampshire sharing their personal stories. I have a colleague in Congress who has shared his story about a member of his own family who's suffering with addiction, and he's so fearful. He's just waiting for that phone call. We break down these stigmas by having these dialogues, which is why I'm so glad we're doing this today as a first step. I'm here for the next 2 weeks during a recess period where we're going to be working within the community. This is the first conversation we're having as part of this recess. It will be the first conversation I take back to Washington.
As far as the courts are concerned, there are grant funds available both from the federal government and the state government if you are looking at very specific kinds of programs, drug treatment courts. Chasing grants is not fun. Oftentimes there are startup grants and they're good for 3 years, maybe you get an extension of 5 years, and then the expectation is that the local funding unit in our state court system that meets your city or your county, the expectation is that at some point they're going to take that over. I can give you a personal experience. I ran the Dearborn Drug Court program for 10 years. We started out with larger grants, both federal and state. The startup grants, we went through I think 2 or 3 different grants in the course of 10 years. The last grant we had, request we made, was only for $15,000. At that time I was chief judge. My philosophy was get the local funding unit to buy into this so we don't have to chase grants. We were turned down because at that time there were $2 million available from the state and $9 million in grant requests. That picture has changed dramatically, by the way. The money is actually there. And our local funding unit said, well, if you can't get the $15,000, we can't afford to do this. That picture has also changed locally for us over at Dearborn, which I'm happy to say. But the grant cycle is a brutal cycle to chase. You're constantly chasing after the next dollar. It would be nice if the funds were simply available statewide to every court that wanted to do it without having to go through all of those extra hoops. But the money is there. But again, it serves very specific silos. And somebody at our drug court conference used the term silo in talking about this. And I know this particular meeting is about opioids, and yes, you do at times need to focus on very specific things that have very specific needs associated with them. There is a danger that comes with focusing on a single drug. There's a danger that comes with chasing a single grant for a single purpose, and that is you don't communicate with each other and you lose what I referred to before, and that is the overall philosophy from our system, I'm speaking for the courts, of being a problem-solving court. Generally, every judge should be a drug court judge. Not because they got a grant to run a drug court program, but because they recognize that there is a body of citizens who are going to come in front of them who have a substance use disorder, and whether it's opioids or cocaine or meth or inhalants. Talk about a nightmare trying to deal with inhalants. If it's any of those things, we should be applying the same philosophy across the board. Now, the specific needs that come with this are identifiable. There's some overlap, but I just want to put in a plug that from a financial standpoint, we get forced to compete with each other for dollars to do something that if a general overall umbrella philosophy were applied, we'd be training every judge, all court staff to have the same approach throughout. And surprise, sometimes you find out people have problems that aren't on the surface, because when they were asking for $35, they looked okay. And it didn't surface until a little later on into the experience with that individual. And I just wanted to throw that in.
And our office is also happy to help with grants applications through letters of support. So that goes for our police department, our fire department, our municipalities, our schools. We will help you apply for those while we're living within the current reality, which are siloed programs that probably should just be a part of the way we do business, but that is something that our office does. All right.
All right, the next question is to Chief Cade. In addition to Narcan training, do your officers receive any sensitivity training or mental health education?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, this is a complicated issue, and our officers today, and I use this term to describe the role of a police officer. Now, I'm in my 40th year with the Livonia Police Department, and 8 years as being chief. And when I speak about our responsibilities back when I started my job and to where we're at today, how much there's the same and how much change. And the change is really societal ills fall at the feet of our average police officer. That includes mental health issues, addiction issues, a lot of social issues, homelessness, and we have very few resources to help with that. And that's, again, calling out Growth Works and St. Mary's with the addiction issue has been a godsend for us because it gives us now an opportunity or an avenue to get people the help that they need because they really don't need to be in jail. Mental health, when Wayne County Jail, and this isn't the exact percentage, but the undersheriff, Dan Fonis, spoke that like 67% of the prisoners in the Wayne County Jail are being treated for mental health issues. That's massive. So going directly to the question, do my officers receive training, sensitivity training, and resource training in this and other issues? Yes. We mandate that training for all of our officers. We do that through our insurance carrier, MMRMA, and along with seeking out experts in the field to help prepare our officers for the issues that they are going to address on the street. And as those that have experienced this issue, the addiction issue, dealing with it on the street is a lot different. It's a very dynamic situation and with all of the parties that are involved. But we take this responsibility seriously. It's very unfortunate that we have limited resources to deal and help with a lot of folks and families that truly need it.
Thanks, Chief.
Dan, can I add just real quick onto that? So one of the things that we do to support the police departments as well as the courts is that we've done this in Canton, we'll be doing it in Northville Township as well, and coming to Livonia and Westland, is that we provide the officers with stigma and recovery kind of training, right? So as the chief mentioned, do you know how difficult it must be for those police officers to be on the streets and coming across me over and over and over and over again, and taking away from some real serious issues as well that might need to be taken care of out there. So we go in and I bring in our coaches that are in recovery, and they tell their stories, specifically to the police department and the officers, and explain that, you know what, recovery is possible. And then we try to help through that piece as well to help them deal with that. We are also on, to add, the 16th, the 34th, and the 35th drug treatment court panels. So there's a coach that is in the sobriety court, drug court panel that works with the court that actually is representing the me's and the us's of the world that were in active addiction, that now we assist with trying to help through that piece of it too. So it's just another layer.
Actually, Patrick, the next question, we're going to start with you. Anyone else on the panel, let me know if you want to address this as well. Addicts can be very convincing. We heard this with the Ken Daniels presentation, and manipulative. What can be done to protect family members who are being taken advantage of psychologically, financially, or otherwise?
Well, first of all, and I always say this when I'm speaking to anyone and addressing it, you have to take care of you first. Sometimes it becomes really difficult. Do you think that my wife really wanted to walk out of there and say, you people do with whatever, and don't call your children? No. But you know what? She had a responsibility to take care of herself and to raise our children in a safe environment. And the environment that I presented wasn't safe. So there's a point where it comes to be, you can't continue to enable. You have a life to live, and you have to move forward. So you try to get the folks, the me's of the world in active addiction, connected to healthy resources. And you can only do so much. So it's upon us as the peer recovery coaches and those that concentrate on recovery to get those folks, the us's of the world that were in active addiction, into treatment. and into healthy surroundings. And that's what we do. We don't pass judgment. We just walk through the shoes that we have walked in and continue to provide experience, strength, and hope to those that need help.
Judge Summers have something?
You don't have to bail them out the first time or the 10th time. Sometimes let them sit there for that week, 10 days, 2 weeks. You bring them home, they're going to be back out on the street. That goes back to what I mentioned earlier. I try to be very careful how I set those conditions. Frankly, I also have in mind the family members to try to protect them. And it's, again, this is speaking to my own profession, but judges need to be careful how they set those conditions when mom is crying in the back row and she's not going to say, no, I don't want him to come home. She's going to say she wants him to come home. And if I'm careful to read the situation and set terms that will protect the defendant, I can also at the same time try to protect the family member. And that's like using tethers and things like that. But yeah, I don't know how many times I've said I'm to the point where I just speak my mind. And I'll just literally out loud say, you don't have to bail him out, by the way. This is the bond I'm setting. You do not have to bail them out. Sometimes they listen.
Another thing is really, and Patrick said it, is this idea of enabling. A lot of people don't understand what they're doing and what that means to enable someone. There's a very fine line between being helpful and being enabling. Being enabling is someone, your loved one is sick and you're saying, okay, I'm going to go to the liquor store, I'm going to go, to their dealer. Being helpful is saying, you're sick, I'll take you to St. Mary's, you can go detox there. Wherever they are, they're going to figure it out, whether that's you doing it for them or them having to figure it out, but really understanding what that is and setting healthy boundaries and following through with natural consequences. People don't learn by not experiencing the natural consequences of life. I have a 1-year-old and she's now learning that through temper tantrums when you're told no because you're not supposed to do anything. If you put your hand on a hot plate that burns, ouch, you know not to do that, right? It's a natural consequence and reaction. So if you are, your loved one is suffering, it's important. And I think it's probably the hardest thing as a family member to try to wrap your head around and really stand strong behind. Is setting those boundaries, right? It doesn't have to be like I'm going to throw you on the streets, but a lot of the times I think the financial support is a really big thing. If you're using, I'm not going to pay for your cell phone bill for you to call your dope man, every morning when you wake up. Figure it out, right? And I think it's, like I said, because we take responsibility, we think it's our fault. I know, when some of you shared your stories, it was always those questions, what am I not doing? And again, it's that really understanding that you're doing everything you can, right? That person, whenever they're ready, has to make that choice themselves to show up. Thanks.
All right, that's all the time we had for questions, but there's a couple of quick announcements we need to do before we officially adjourn. First, we bring Carol Zaninga up, who's second in command at Hagera Health Systems, to talk about some of the programs and resources we offer.
Executive Director at Livonia Health. And just before I say anything, for those of you who don't have opportunities to go to presentations like this, I just want to commend your panel. This was outstanding. The information, the quality of the information that they provided today was just really great and really appreciate it. I also want to commend the collaborative effort of the Western Wayne group that got together to develop the services that they spoke about today. Working in behavioral health, those of you who live with folks with behavioral health issues, you know that the complexities involved. Developing the services are as complex, and we are as concerned as you are. And to be able to pull together a variety of services and come up with a comprehensive service that has been so successful is really outstanding. Hagera Health, if you're not familiar with us, we are a comprehensive behavioral health agency that provides services in Livonia and across Western Wayne. We start with services at neonatal, addressing mothers who are pregnant and using substances. We start with that age group. We move into infant mental health, and we serve adolescents, adults, and older adults with mental health, substance use, and developmental disabilities. You can find us if you want details about what we do at hagerahealth.org on the web. We are been out there for a very long time, about 40 years. If I will be here for a little bit, so if there's anybody here who needs any additional information, is looking for our type of services, I'm certainly available. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I'd like to bring on Laura Rousseau now. We'll give you an opportunity to hear from Ken Daniels.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank Pat Strokes and Judge Summers for commenting on Families Against Narcotics. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but they mentioned my organization, and so I thought that you might want a little information about that. So Families Against Narcotics is a nonprofit organization that provides resources, education, and support to families and individuals that have been affected by addiction. There are 22 chapters across Michigan, and each chapter has a monthly public forum. I'm the president of the Northwest Wayne County chapter, all of our meetings in Canton. Our public forums are the first Monday of every month. They take place at the Summit on the Park in Canton. And so our next one is May 6th, and we have 5 people in recovery who are speaking. Basically, it's a recovery panel. Each person has achieved recovery in different ways, and they maintain recovery in different ways. So it provides a lot of valuable information to our attendees. A lot of the people come are community members and also individuals in recovery, family members who've been impacted by addiction. Our particular chapter also offers 2 other types of meetings to families and community members. We have a family and friends peer support group that meets in Canton at the administration building in Canton twice a month, every Tuesday and every Thursday in the evening. And then we also have a grief support group for individuals who've lost loved ones as a result of addiction that also meets the second and fourth Tuesday of every month at the PC Eleanor Club, also in Canton. If you want information about where you can learn about us, Judge Summers mentioned that there is a website, Families Against Narcotics, that you can go to. There's a tab on the top bar that says locations, and if you click on that, you get a drop down with all 22 locations, including Northwest Wayne, and then you can access where all the meetings are at the different ones through that. We also have a very active Facebook page. If you do Facebook, Wayne Chapter Fan, I manage that page. I post things on it almost every day in terms of articles and things relating to addiction, and all of our events, including our public forums and our family support group meetings and group support group meetings are all on that Facebook page, so you can get the information about that there as well. Now, on the Ken Daniels thing, we are just starting to promote an event that we are doing at the Village Theater on May 22nd called A Closer Look. Our keynote speaker is Ken Daniels. We're also showing a 40-minute film called Chasing Hope, which is focused on young people, 6th grade to 12th grade, and gives information to those young people as well as parents about issues dealing with drug addiction and drug abuse. And there's a variety of other things happening. So that's going to be a huge event. We're really excited about it. Again, that's at the Village Theater in Canton, May 22nd, with Ken Daniels as our keynote speaker. So thank you.
One other quick announcement. On Saturday, April 27th, St. Mary Mercy Livonia is doing a drug take-back event. Go to the south entrance parking lot between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Saturday, April 27th. So any accepted medications for disposal, and will be prescription medications in tablet form, controlled substance in tablet form, over-the-counter medications. They will not take liquids, inhalers, patches, or syringes, but any kind of basically pills. If you want to get rid of them in a safe fashion, take them to St. Mary Mercy on Saturday, April 27th from 10 to 2 in the south parking lot. And also, we talk about all the people that contribute to it. Enough can't be said for our first responders, police, and fire. They are really, in many cases, the one that can start the road to recovery for addicts. And on behalf of all first responders, to Police Chief Cade, let me just close with one final thought. Realize that everyone is dealing with something, whether it be substance, mental, physical, personal, financial. The more we recognize that, the more we have empathy to understand and support others. Thank you to our panel. Thank you for Cade and the Livonia Democratic Club for putting this forum on. Thank you for all of you for coming. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.